Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsal, and I'm excited for the conversation we're going to be having today because it is going to be the very first time that we talk about this specific topic here on the Profit with Law podcast. It's all the rage. It's all the buzz. People are talking about it out there on the interwebs. There's somebody that I've had on the podcast a couple of times that's doing a lot of talking about AI when it comes to law firms and how they can implement that. But we've got our guest today is Shanif Dhanani. Shanif Dhanani is a Chat GPT consultant. And with AI and Chat GPT, it's a software development and data science background that he holds. Currently helps businesses understand and build systems that connect their internal and proprietary systems to Chat GPT. It's a mouthful, enabling internal employees, customers, and other stakeholders to reap the benefits of using large language models on their own data. Don't worry if you're already glazing your eyes over. I can assure you that Shanif is going to dumb this down for you. We're going to really understand what we're talking about. He's built machine learning analytics and software systems at large companies like Twitter and Booz Allen, smaller startups like Aptio, where he was the founder, and Tap Commerce, which was one of the world's first mobile advertising platforms. Shanif, welcome to the show.
Hey, Moshe, it's great to be here. That was a mouthful, but no, I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And when we first start, everybody wants to know, who is this guy Shanif, right? So before we start getting down into the details of what we wanted to talk about today, just give us a little bit of a background of who you are as an individual and how in the world you ended up being at the front end of the AI and Chat GPT platform.
Yeah, it's funny. Everything in my bio is correct, but I like to simplify. I like to say I'm a data geek. And so I've been working with AI and software for about 20, 25 years now. And I've been building systems and I love it. I think it's really cool and fascinating. And so for me, I've worked in this field of AI for a long time. I did it at a small startup, and then I did it at Twitter, then I did it at another startup. And so I've just always been in the space. And one of the problems I've seen is that it's very hard for businesses to get their own data sometimes into these systems. And so that's just what I started doing as a consultant and sort of taken off since then. So that's how I've found myself where I am today, working with ChatGPT.
Awesome. So I want to start at the beginning. I want to assume that my audience does not know what ChatGPT does. They don't understand what AI does. I'm sure there are listeners who are quite well versed in it, but I want to start there. So can you give us the lay of the land? Like, what is AI? How does it differ from technology we're already using? And then where does ChatGPT come in?
Yeah, it's funny. There's this AI idea, which I think has become such a buzzword recently. And it's different for different people. In general, AI just refers to this field of technology, computer science, that tries to get machines to do the same things that humans can do. And it's got a lot of subfields. It's got robotics, so you can imagine like this big sort of machine walking around. That's AI. But you can also imagine something that tries to forecast how much sales you're going to have in the next year, and if you do it in a certain way, that's AI. And so it's sort of this word that means everything and nothing at the same time. But it really does refer to this idea of what we're trying to do to make machines smarter. And then in this AI field, you've got a bunch of subfields, one of which is called, let's say, generative AI. And that's the idea that you can use machines to make things, make art or music or science or language. And that's where ChatGPT falls. It falls in this world of generative AI, where you can use a machine to create, in the case of ChatGPT, smart sounding natural language. And eventually things like images and videos as well. We're getting there, but really ChatGPT is really good for producing things that are coherent, cogent, and just make sense from a written text perspective.
So, I mean, let's talk about like natural real world applications. Images, interestingly, I have a much easier time wrapping my head around how this can be used. I was at a talk about a year ago with somebody who really dove into AI graphics. as that's what they do. Then that's their whole business now. And it was interesting because they introduced us to one tool, a free tool that really didn't do a great job, but it really gave you the idea of what was possible. And I can say, hey, take a picture of Moshe Amzil and turn him into the one of the Avengers, and it'll come back with scour the internet for a picture of me and for what the Avengers look like, and then kind of like morph us together into one, and all of a sudden I'm a Marvel comic. And the real world application for me is I don't need stock photos anymore for any of my marketing images. Right. We can basically use AI imagery to do all of the images that we need for our blog posts, for our ads on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, all the things that we're doing, that we're just kind of like, either buying images or using them. But I know that Chat GPT is a language model, and it spits back text for you. So how in the business application, what's the biggest real world? I'm sure there's a lot of them, but what are the biggest real world applications you're seeing?
Right now, I would say that there's maybe 4 or 5 sort of what I'm calling killer applications today. And I think there's going to be a lot more in the future. But today, I think most people are using it for search as a replacement for Googling something. Now, what's interesting is ChatGPT actually doesn't know anything about facts, but it's like you said, it's a language model. And what it has done is it's been trained on the internet. And so it's got all of this information on it, on how it was trained, and it was trained on all of these pieces of text, and it's learned how people talk. And in doing so, it's been able to pick up the rules about how do you answer a question, or how do you answer this particular thing. And so a lot of people are just using it now to say, hey, what's the recipe for X, Y, and Z? Or how do I write this particular piece of code? For example, where before you might have been going to Google and looking this stuff up. Now you can ask ChatGPT, and the benefit is it'll usually come up with an answer for you that's straightforward and answers your question, and you don't have to go through a bunch of links. So I would say people are using it for text quite a bit. And then a lot of people are also using it. You mentioned sort of blogs and marketing content. A lot of people are using it to write their blogs and content. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to go, because when you see what it writes, it's still a little bit robotic and soulless, but it produces, content that's grammatically perfect. It produces content that makes sense. It flows linearly. Maybe it lacks a little bit of a personality. So depending on what you're going for, it could still be okay. So search is big. Content like blogs, marketing content, social media posts, that's big. And there's a world now where I'm playing in, which is sort of the world where you've got these virtual assistants, or what's called an autonomous agent, where it can actually take a command from you and execute that command. So for example, I just saw a demo of somebody say, hey, go order me a Domino's pizza. And this bot automatically went to Domino's website, filled in the name, the address without any human intervention, clicked all the buttons it needed to, and then ordered a pizza. And so that's all powered by these language models. And the reason is because they're sort of intelligent enough where they can say, okay, this is the output that I need to produce that's going to get the user exactly what they need. And so those are some of the examples. And like you said, there's a whole bunch more, but those are the most salient ones right now.
Now, as when you gave this example of the, hey, order me a pizza, I think back to Alexa and Siri, right?
Yeah.
Like, are they also in this artificial intelligence realm? Is that really what we're doing? Is it really just like a Chat GPT kind of interface in each of the rooms in our homes?
They are definitely, the part of the AI world. And the funny thing among data scientists is something is only AI until it becomes commonplace and you know how to use it. And then it's just math. And so like a few years ago, we were like, oh, you can project how many salespeople are going to get using all of this fancy math. And that was AI. And a few years ago, Siri was math. Siri was AI because you could talk to it. And now it's just, it's a voice recognition model. Today, ChatGPT is AI, but in 5 years, it's just going to be another sort of tool. And so you're right, like all of these tools are really good at sort of taking in information and making sense of them the way that humans would, and then coming out with some sort of response. Siri, Alexa do it in the form of voice and audio. The tool you mentioned does it in images, and we're starting to see video now, and ChatGPT does it in the form of natural language. These models are actually starting to come together. So eventually you'll have one model that can do all of this, but right now they are separate. But yeah, these are all good examples of AI tools.
Yeah, I recently purchased a video application that I haven't had a chance to test yet, but it's essentially intended to take a message, whether it's a marketing message or a message like, "Hey, I just sold a new somebody new just joined my program," and it's a welcome message to them, where it basically takes the video. Like, I have a core video I record that's the welcome message I want to give, and then it takes my face and my speech and it tacks on at the beginning, hi, Shanif,
Awesome.
welcome to to the program. So I haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but that's just, that's one of the examples, I guess, of what's coming down the road is being able to just have it learn what you look like and what you sound like, and then create video, which is kind of a scary thing because there could be a lot of bad actor usage of that, like just creating fictitious video about somebody committing a crime, or somebody saying something they didn't say, could be used in political campaigns against somebody when they never actually said anything, and there's a video that looks exactly like them saying something that they didn't want to say. So I can definitely see there's a lot of danger lurking around the corner with this stuff.
You're absolutely right. Like, a lot of people are worried. I'm worried about this because this technology is so good now. It actually looks real. So you really have to be careful about a lot of this stuff. And we as consumers have to be a little bit more diligent and dubious about what we see. But the interesting thing is that this technology can do this. And if you use it for good, for example, greeting somebody in a video or making something personalized for them, it can actually work quite well for your business.
Yeah, now I have heard stuff like, I have heard attorneys using ChatGPT to help them write legal briefs. And then there was stories going around of, how an attorney, had ChatGPT write a legal brief, and it gave case law, which wasn't actually case law. Either it actually wasn't decided in their favor, like it went the other way, or it was a fictitious case. I don't remember the details. I read about it. I'm sure that some of my listeners probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And that goes back to what you shared at the beginning, which is, that ChatGPT is a language model. And when people use it for search, it's not actually knowing whether what it's providing is fact or fiction. It doesn't differentiate. It just gathers information and spits it back at you in a way that's that sounds right and is prepared in a format that's acceptable to you. So I think that when we have this conversation, and I'm curious to know if you have anything to add to this, but I think that whenever you're doing anything that is informational, you really want to make sure that you're fact checking. You're not relying on what you're getting from ChatGPT as biblical, and as far as the meaning of it.
You're absolutely right. And this is what's known as a hallucination in the world of AI. It basically just makes something up. Like, let's be honest, it's just making things up and saying them as if they're true. And this is a really big problem for businesses. I actually remember the case you're referring to. I think that it was an older gentleman, and so he thought that ChatGPT was a true search engine, and so he used it to write a brief, and it ended up making a bunch of cases up that didn't exist in real life. And this is a common problem across all businesses. This idea of hallucination comes from the fact that, as you said, Moshe, this is a language model. It's making up words that are most likely to come next based on the training data that it has seen, but it doesn't remember facts. It doesn't remember concepts. It doesn't remember these things. And so what we have to do as business users is work around this. Now, part of what I'm doing is building software that lets these people who want to ask real world questions cross-check these questions using their existing documents so that it doesn't make stuff up. But you can also use it as a way to kickstart maybe a search process. A buddy of mine said, well, look, I know that these things hallucinate. So when I ask it a question, I'll just use it as a starting point, and then I'll take what it said and go and Google it to make sure that it's actually true. But the first step is knowing that this is actually a possibility and it's a real problem so that you can protect yourself when you need to use it for factual situations.
Now, A friend of mine is he's got a legal template business, so he sells legal templates to a specific market segment. And he's actually creating an application. It's in beta right now, where he's compiled thousands and thousands of questions, legal questions that his market would ask him, and he's gone through and collated them into like which ones are the same questions, and actually created real answers that he wrote. So but what he's going to be doing is he's going to be using AI to, when somebody asks a question, to figure out which question are they really asking and match it with the correct answer that he's already provided. So they will be getting a real legal answer. And what the AI is doing is matching it with the right solution to the question being asked, which is really, really cool and is going to be a really powerful tool when he's done with it. But he's probably investing, thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, to create this. Where does the small business owner come in this? Like there's probably a ton of real world applications where we could say, okay, if I can access my data and marry it to AI, I can probably get some really cool things, like finding out what our conversion rate is or what our close rate is. And this, is our close rate higher on Tuesdays than it is on Mondays? The kind of questions. But in reality, I don't think that our small business owners are going to be able to afford to implement anything like that. So when we look at smaller businesses and how they can use this technology to further their business, where should they be looking for the applications?
You're absolutely right. You're not going to recreate ChatGPT with your own data, but the good thing is you actually don't have to. So there's a few different things that small businesses can do, and even your buddy might be able to benefit from some of these ideas. Right now, there's a lot of tools that are popping up, which lets you do things like upload a PDF or a set of documents and then connect them to a chatbot, and the bot can easily answer questions using the context of those documents. A lot of these tools are free, and even ChatGPT itself has a few plugins which allow you to upload a document and then ask questions of it. So if all they want to do is maybe get a couple of quick questions that are sourced and cited properly, they can use one of these free tools, one of which is something that I've produced. But if they want something like their own chatbot, for example, that they can put on a website and they say, hey, I need you to be able to answer all of these questions for my visitors, but do it only using these pieces of documentation that I've given you, you can actually build something like this for pretty cheap. Now, if you wanted to build something yourself, you probably would need to hire an engineer, a software engineer, to do a lot of the work for you. But what we're starting to see is there's a lot of products now that are coming to market where all you need to do is connect your documentation to the system and then put a little bit of code, for example, on your website. And then you have a chatbot that's up and running. And the chatbot connects your documentation to ChatGPT so people can start talking to it. So, while this is the common thing that a lot of businesses want to talk to me about, they've got a bunch of data and they're really worried that they have to go back and recreate their own ChatGPT to use it. And while that might work for some of the largest businesses that have billions of pieces of data, in reality, you as a small business, what you can do is take what data you do have and then use it with ChatGPT to answer questions. You just have to make sure that the context from your data is sent to ChatGPT correctly whenever somebody asks a question. And that does require a little bit of engineering, or you could use a product that's off the shelf to do it.
Okay, so our listeners are able to access their data with ChatGPT with one of these, I don't know what they're like, I guess we would call it middleware applications, to kind of like act in between. But what would they do with that? I mean, you talked about having a chatbot on the website. Like, what would I mean? You're not sharing your confidential client information with somebody who's coming and asking questions on your website. So what are the real world use applications? And maybe you can give me some examples, of how businesses are using this to kind of get people thinking about what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just for full transparency, we've built one of these tools ourselves where you can plug in your Google Drive, your Google Sheets, your PDF, your websites, and then chat with data. One example, we have a customer and they're in the financial services space, so not quite legal, but they service federal government employees. And they help these government employees think about how they should be retiring and what are the policies that the government offers that aren't available in the private sector. And there's a lot of, I don't know if you've ever done anything with federal governments, but there's a lot of nuances and red tape. So these employees have a lot of questions like, hey, if I'm the spouse of a military survivor and I have been in the military for 20 years and I've got this situation, when can I retire, right? Super specific. Now, the interesting thing is all of these policies and documents are written down. So what my client is doing is anytime he gets a crazy question like this from a customer or anything that's super specific, he will go into our chatbot that we built for him. We just built it on Slack because that's what his team was using. And this bot is connected to all of the documents about retirement that they've created and all of the government documents. And they can ask this question. They can say, my customer wants to know this really specific thing. And the bot will then go and find that information from the document, respond back to the salesperson who can then respond back to the customer. And whereas something like this might take a few, anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes of research after a call, now you can answer a customer on the call. And so this is one example. Another example is, let's say you've got a data set of a bunch of data from like in a Google Sheets or an Excel file, and you need to be able to match some of that data from the Google file to a user's profile so that you can find the best record or row within the file that matches the user's profile. Well, now you can do that with ChatGPT. You can say, hey, I've got this customer. He runs a chemical businesses fertilizer company in Idaho, and he's looking for the best funding opportunities in the region. I've got a list of funding opportunities. Can you find the best ones for him? And you send this into a chatbot. It's connected to your data set. It's also connected to ChatGPT, and it'll find the right answer for you. And so businesses are using this today. Those are just a couple of examples, but I can provide a ton more. But they're using this today to basically take what they're already doing for their core operations and automate a lot of it, or make it somehow more efficient. So they're taking their existing processes and they're automating it. They're also using it to enable new features. So for example, one of my customers has about 80 million product reviews from e-commerce stores, and they're using ChatGPT to basically categorize these reviews into different categories, which they then provide on a dashboard. And so I worked on this project for them. So it's really it comes down to like, what can you do automatically that might have taken a lot of human time before, or what is it now possible to do that wasn't possible before? So hopefully that helps. Yeah. I know there are a few different examples.
All really interesting stuff. I have some specific questions about, can this be done? One of the things that we do, one of the marketing efforts we've been trying is going back to snail mail, like send things in the mail. We've kind of moved away from that in today's digital market, but it's a great way for me to get in front of my clients. And yes, our podcast listeners are in that, in that world. But it's not easy to create a list of all the law firms in the country, right? Or I need to pay a lot of good money for that. Or we have a list, but maybe there are bad addresses on it. Can we take that list that we have and send it into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you validate that, each of these law firms has this address listed on their website? And let me know which ones don't, or maybe against Google My Business listings, and or maybe we can say, hey, create a list of every law firm in this specific, in this specific area. Is it already able to do that?
It was. So there's it's a really interesting use case. One of the things we have to keep coming back to is how do we make sure it doesn't just hallucinate or make up a bunch of stuff? Now, what's interesting is ChatGPT used to have this plugin which let it browse the internet anytime that you asked a question, and then it would use data from the internet to help answer your question. So you can imagine a world where ChatGPT is plugged into the internet. You give it a list of, let's just say small time, 10 law firms, and you say, hey, can you validate that these addresses are correct? It'll go through and it'll hit the Google or Bing search engine. It'll come back with their web pages, browse their web pages, pull out the data and validate it. Now, what's interesting is ChatGPT removed search engine browsing from their plugin offering. And I think that was because people were using it to get behind paywalls. So out of the box, this isn't something that ChatGPT will do, but this is something that my software can do or other software can do, where you're connecting your data to different tools. A tool could be a search engine, or it could be a calculator, or it could be a Salesforce database, anything that you really care about as a business. And what you can do is you can connect your tools to your chatbot and then use ChatGPT to help answer questions using the tools that you've given it access to. So right now, it's probably not going to be able to do what you want out of the box, but there's this whole new world of what I call autonomous agents, which are going to be able to do what you want. I bet you that world is coming in 6 to 12 months, and I've already built a lot of it, and a lot of people like me are building it. So it's definitely on the way if it's not here already.
So if I needed to build something like that, what kind of price tag would I be looking at to just go to somebody like you and say, hey, can you build this for me?
So I appreciate that. A lot of senior engineers and people who have been doing this for a while will try to charge you an arm and a leg. Some people might charge you 50K or 80K. But what I do is I say, okay, what is the actual use case that you want? Oh, you want to be able to answer this. Well, in order for us to do that, we've already got a core product. We've got something that you can chat with and answer you. We just need to build a search engine. So if you pay me something like $4,000, for example, was my last integration cost. You'll be able to, you pay for that. I will provide the ability for you to connect your data to the search engine using our existing tool, and then you just get free access for life. And so a lot of people there's going to be a lot of shills out there right now, a lot of people who are trying to take advantage of the situation. And so a lot of them will start charging you an arm and a leg for stuff like this. And it is a sort of a meaningful software development effort, don't get me wrong. But if you're working with a company that's already built out a lot of the core infrastructure and core software, then they're more than willing to work with you because they're trying to build out a product themselves. So don't be surprised if you go to an engineer from SpaceX or Tesla or Stripe and they say, hey, this would cost me $60,000 to build for you, but you're probably just talking to the wrong people at that point. This is the problem with software consulting is it varies quite a bit, but it just makes it more important to find the right person to work with over time.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, as I'm thinking about my own personal use case scenarios, I'm trying to put myself into my client's shoes. Like as you're talking about what it can do, and I'm thinking about creating an address list, but then I'm thinking about, okay, when we put on the Law Firm Growth Summit, we look for sponsors, right? It can go out and it can find potential sponsors for us and their contact information and who the right person to talk to is. We need guests on the podcast. We can have it go out and find us, and right now I have people doing that, but it's virtual assistants and they're sitting there and they're scouring LinkedIn and they're, using Sales Navigator and they're trying to make connection requests and things like that. We can probably circumvent all of that effort by just having a bot go out and do it. And where that comes in for our clients is, even a small law firm, when you're trying to create a circle of influence of people that, can refer you business, you have to figure out who you want to create a relationship with. So, perhaps this tool can be used to help you compile the list of people that you want to connect with, validate them in some way. It's just one small example of what you might be able to do, when you're doing this. I'm wondering if the tool can help in the hiring process. Like, can we use it as a background check tool for new people coming in and finding dirt on them that perhaps you wouldn't know otherwise.
I have started to see some people use it for hiring, more along the lines of doing things like automated video interviews and automated resume analysis. What you're talking about is something that's a little bit more complicated. I like to say ChatGPT is really good at tasks and it falls flat on its face for jobs. A task is sort of a well-defined thing. So you mentioned, hey, look, you got VAs who are helping you go out and build relationships with people on LinkedIn. Well, one thing you could do is say, okay, build a ChatGPT bot that scrapes someone's LinkedIn profile, automatically connects with them and sends them a personalized message. Straightforward task, can be automated. But, having to then follow up with that person and build relationships with them, ChatGPT is still not really good at doing something like that. So to come back to your question, can I use this for background checks, or how do I use this for hiring and making sure that somebody I'm talking to is legit? You can build a bot that connects, let's say, a Facebook profile scraper. And its job is to take somebody's Facebook profile and pass that information to ChatGPT and say, hey, what are some of the green flags and red flags about this person? ChatGPT won't do this out of the box, but you can build something that'll do this. And what's interesting is the sky's the limit with this stuff, because today allows us to do something that we never could before, which is intelligent automation. You don't have to have an engineer code in, 100 different rules necessarily. Maybe you do, but now you have this bot that's really smart, and you give it a question, you give it the context that it has to answer that question, and it'll come back to you. And so a lot of this stuff, it's not built yet. For example, this hiring red flag indicator, it's not there yet, but people are building a lot of interesting tools right now to make a lot of this stuff automated. And as a business owner, you can certainly work with an engineer, a software engineer, to build something like this out, depending on whether or not it's going to help you. World's kind of the oyster here.
Is there an app store for these kinds of middleware applications to interface with Chat GPT? How do you find out if something like that already exists instead of trying to recreate it?
It's right now, it's the Wild West. I don't know if you remember when sort of the internet first came out and everybody was pushing out their own websites and there were no good search engines. You had to learn about things through word of mouth and sort of ads. That's sort of what we are right now. I'm working on sort of a directory of AI tools that should be up in the next couple of weeks. There will be app stores, certainly. The closest thing we have today is on the ChatGPT website. You can go through and browse a list of the plugins that people have created. Plugins are third-party tools that allow their system to connect to ChatGPT directly in the website. And so that's probably the most popular way of doing it right now. But it sort of precludes stuff that's not a plugin. Like if you've got a standalone app or if you've got a standalone agent, it probably wouldn't be listed there. So unfortunately, it's the Wild West right now. So Google is probably still your best friend here.
Okay. I want to pull the conversation back to our listeners, law firm owners, lawyers. There's obviously the sales and marketing side of it, where they can write blog posts with it. They can use it for sales scripts, things like that. But what about in the actual performance of their legal work? Can they use it to draft documents, like legal documents, where they're not asking it to do research, but they're rather asking it to compile, because you had differentiated jobs and tasks, right? So this is a task where, based on certain criteria, a certain language would be included or not included in a document, right? So can we use it to draft those documents?
Yeah, I will cautiously say absolutely. Now, cautiously, because I am not a lawyer, and I'm sure your listeners will appreciate this. I am not a legal professional. Please take what I say with a grain of salt. But one thing that ChatGPT is very, very good at doing is creating content and editing content in a specific format. And so if you have a legal requirement that you need to create some sort of documentation for, you can prompt it with what you need, and it'll come up with a draft for you. Now, one thing to know about these language models is the longer the output, let's put it this way. The longer the text, the more you're going to have to look over the text to make sure that it's accurate and it does what it wants to do. Because like humans, as context gets longer and longer in the output of a language model, it might start to forget a couple of facts that it said earlier, or it might start to forget some of the things that it said. And so it starts to get a little bit dicey. But that being said, they're very good actually at producing long form content. And so if you want to give it a quick prompt and say, hey, this is what I need, please create this in this style for me, it'll do so. Even better is if you've got it hooked up to your existing documentation so that it doesn't hallucinate things that don't exist. And then it'll provide a long form piece of documentation for you. Then what you can do is you can read over it and ask it to make changes, just like you would with a human. Say, please change this, please edit this, update this. And it'll go through and edit it for you, and it'll come back with something that's fairly reasonable, if not quite good. And so it's one of those contexts I mentioned earlier where people are using it to, let's say, instead of creating a blog post, you're creating a draft or a brief. It's very good at that type of work.
I don't know how much interaction you've had with law firms. Are there other use case scenarios you could think of for law firms besides for marketing and drafting?
We've actually spoken with a couple of law firms, and one of the things that they've mentioned is they've got all of this case documentation. They've got, if not hundreds, then thousands of pages. And they need to do a lot of research for trying to figure out what particular legal principle most applies to their current case, for example. Now, sometimes they might have to outsource this work to a team that does this in 3 weeks or 4 weeks and gets back to them. One of the things that people can use ChatGPT for, which doesn't come up a lot today, but I think it's going to become even more and more prevalent, is document answering and search and information retrieval. Now, the way you do this is a little bit specific. Let's say you've got these thousands of pages of case documentation. Well, you can't just feed them all into ChatGPT because there's a limit on how many words you can give it at a time. But if you use a tool like ours, what you can do is feed this documentation into a database. And then you can ask it a question. You can say, what was the ruling from this case? 20 years ago, case name was this. With the right type of database, it's called a vector database, you can start to pick out pieces of different documents that are likely to have the question or the answer to your question. You can pick out this paragraph from this case law and this paragraph from that one and this paragraph from that one. And you can get hundreds of pieces of context that probably will have the answer to your question somewhere. And then you can give that all to ChatGPT and you could say, using this context and this context only, answer my question. If this is not found in this context that you don't know. And by using a tool like this, you're able to significantly cut down on the amount of time you need to answer a question or find relevant case law or do research. Now, there are tools, like I said, there are tools out there that are doing this. Some of them might be specific to the legal industry, but a lot of them you can just plug in any documentation and come back with an answer. And I think this is an area where legal professionals will start to see a lot of benefit because it can save them a lot of time.
Yeah, this is all really interesting, and it really starts to get the your gears turning in your head. Like how can I take advantage of this technology? And I think that there's two components when it comes to a law firm owner when you're thinking about this. And Shanif, this might be just a little rant that I go on here, but the first is the business model that you have, because if you're billing your clients by the hour, for example, then any tool that's going to make you work less to get the job done is going to go counter to your profit stream, right? Like you're not going to be able to bill your client for the time if you just had ChatGPT spit out the answer for you. So we kind of, the more and more of these tools that automate what we do and make our jobs easier that are out there, the more likely we have to change the way that we do business and move away from billing for our time and more for billing for the solution. And that becomes something that's difficult in certain areas of certain practice areas of law, because if you're in litigation, it becomes very difficult to separate yourself from the billable hour. But that's something that you're going to have to start thinking more and more about. How do I get creative with my business model so that I can adopt these? Because somebody's going to adopt them. Somebody's going to become a better lawyer than you because they're able to produce a result bigger, better, faster for their client, because they're using all these tools, and they're saving them a mountain of money because they don't need a mountain of human labor to get it done. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is just the assumption, and we covered this on this interview. There's an assumption that when something sounds like a complex idea, that it's going to cost me a lot of money and time to implement it. And I think that Shanif did a good job of helping us understand that, you can have one of these projects and it may just run you, a few $1,000s, and, and now you've got the solution. And then if you look at like how much labor it's saving, how much, how much, like, it's not just labor, right? Like, what if you're in the intake process trying to get a client to use you? Right? What if you can demonstrate unique skill by having the ability to come up with something that they would never be able, it would never be spoken about in a competitor's conference room, and now they're going to choose to use you because you had that answer. So it's not just time saving, cost saving. It's also elevating yourself to a higher caliber of delivery of service, that when you can demonstrate that, it's going to make you more likely to be the one that people are choosing to use when they're trying to select, hey, which law firm am I going to use to get this problem solved? So I really think that when we're in this early frontier stage of this technology, but the reality is that there's a lot of applications already out there, and it's not so difficult to have one created if you have a use case that makes sense. So with that, I'm going to bring it back to you, Shanif, and just ask you two things. First, can you leave our audience with one parting piece of advice or wisdom as it relates to our conversation, or just something that you've picked up in your journey that you want to share? And then the second, if they're intrigued, right, and like, hey, wait a second, maybe my project has merit, maybe it's easy to do. Let me see if Shanif wants to take this on. How do they get in touch with you or take the next step with you to execute on that?
I appreciate that. One piece of advice I will leave you with is a lot of people still haven't tried ChatGPT, or if they've tried it, they might have done it once or twice. I myself was very skeptical in February, right? A few months ago. And then I started using it a little bit. I'm a software engineer, so I started using it a little bit to help me code. And then it did really well. And I started using it a little bit more to help me create larger and larger pieces of code and answer my questions. And all of a sudden now I find myself using it 10 to 20 times a day, if not more. So if you haven't started using it yet, start small. It's not scary. You just go to their website, you type in a quick question, see what it says. If you don't like what it says, then say, okay, I'm not going to use this. Or if you do and you want to say, hey, maybe it did something about 80% of the way, just work with it. You can chat with it almost like a virtual assistant. So first piece of advice, try it out if you haven't yet, and try out some of these other tools that allow you to do something small, like upload a single PDF document and ask questions. I think you'll be a little bit surprised about how well they work. And then if you've got something that's a little bit larger, let's say you want to work with someone like me and you want to connect maybe a huge document repository or your Google Drive, or you want me to plug into your CRM, that's the type of work I'm doing today. So feel free to get in touch. My name is Shanif, Shanif, at locusive.com, LOCUSIVE. Check out our website, locusive.com. You'll probably learn about some of the solutions we offer today. And even if we don't work together, I'm always happy to answer questions and jump on a call. I do them for free, and so no worries there. And so it's just one of those things where the more you get educated, the more you can start to see the possibilities, as I think we've done on this call today. And the more you're going to want to be able to do this for yourself. And I think that you can do it for cheap, and you can do it more quickly and cheaper than most people expect today. So feel free to get in touch, locusive.com.
Awesome. Shanif, thank you so much, folks. This has been a great conversation, and we're here every single Thursday with another great interview. We'll be back again next week. If you're not subscribed yet to the show, make sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player. We shared a lot of tools, web addresses, things like that throughout the course of this episode. All of that has been documented by my team for you in the resources section of the show notes. You can find it in the description of this podcast episode in your podcast player or at profitwithlaw.com. And we recently launched our YouTube channel. This episode, along with many of our previous episodes, are available in video format, but more importantly, we're also releasing exclusive content on YouTube directly. We're also taking thousands and thousands of hours of past content, and maybe I have to have a sidebar with our guest today to see if we can use AI to do what we're doing manually. But we're going through and we're finding those golden nuggets, 60 to 90 seconds of just amazing content for you, and turning those into YouTube shorts. You definitely do not want to miss out on this. Go to profitwithlaw.com/YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, start to consume that stuff there. You will not be disappointed. Folks, we'll catch you next week. Tune in on Thursday. We're going to have another amazing interview for you. Take care.